Drawn objects are perhaps the most important feature in all of SlopeCharts. There's a variety of them, and by their very nature, they are strictly yours. When you begin with SlopeCharts, you have no drawn objects at all, and over the course of time, as you embellish your symbols with objects, those are yours and yours alone, and stay there until such time as you delete them. The best way to illustrate this swiftly is just to thumb through a few symbols here. These are a few exchange-traded funds, and you can see here a number of drawn objects I've already done, such as a rectangle, an arc. Here's a couple of trend lines, more trend lines. You can see by these examples what tend to be the most common used. But the idea here is generally speaking to give you a certain insight or aspect of perception to the chart that isn't normally available when you're simply looking at a raw price chart. Now the tools themselves are down here in the lower left. This area has a variety of icons for things such as pointer types, chart types, whether it's a log or arithmetic scale. But this is the default here, which is the drawn objects. And as of this recording, there's 12 of them. And one of them isn't actually a drawn object at all. It's the default, which is simply the cursor that allows you to drag any portion of the chart to zoom in. But the balance of them are drawn objects. Now, we're not going to go through each and every one of these. First, I just want to mention a general concept is twofold. One, when an object is drawn, you can mouse over it or you can right-click on it in order to change properties. Now, the kinds of properties that are available will change from object to object, but when you mouse over, it will give you some basic information about that particular object, and of course it varies based upon it. And as I say, when you right-click, it'll allow you to change certain characteristics of that object, which will be different from object to object. The other commonality is that there are anchor points to any of these. So for example, I'll choose here Fibonacci retracement, and I click to set one anchor point, and I move my cursor and click to set a second anchor point. And irrespective of the kind of object I'm drawing, that will be the requirement, because you at least have to have one anchor point at a minimum for the simplest object, which is the horizontal line, or in some cases 2, 3, 4, 5, or even more. Just to thumb through these, we have the trend line, which is what you see most commonly here, the channel tool, which is two parallel trend lines, the horizontal, which is for laying down typically support and resistance areas on a price chart. You have the rectangle, the oval, and notice as I mouse over them, there's a tooltip, so you don't have to memorize these. It'll tell you what it is anyway. Here's the arc, the polygon, and down here we have the Fibonacci trio, the retracements, the Fibonacci arc, and the Fibonacci fan. And finally we have Andrew's pitchfork. So you can choose any of these, and once you've chosen it, you can lay down that object. Now, one final thing, when you choose one of these and draw it, it assumes you want to draw one and only one object. Because typically, let's say for example I wanted to draw an arc to highlight this bottom here, so I would click one anchor point, a second anchor point, and drag it, and in this instance draw a third anchor point, so I've got a new object there. But now it reverts back to the standard zoom icon. If for some reason you want to lay down more than one, like 10 trend lines or 5 arcs or what have you, what you do is you go to Preferences by clicking on the gear icon, and right here, stay in drawn object mode. And if you check that, then when you go back to the drawn objects here, for example, just for the sake of this, I'll choose oval, and as I draw it, it remains in that mode, and these are silly, of course. This doesn't have any value to the chart, but I can draw as many of these as I like. And as before, since I don't want these things, I just right-click on it, and I'll delete them one by one. So those general principles should guide you to do just about anything required with drawn objects, and they will be an invaluable part of your toolkit.